This is Zach Kennord with The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and super excited to have Bryan and Dana. If you don't know Bryan and Dana, I met them at DevOps Enterprise Summit. They are a couple and they work together doing CI/CD, which I think absolutely is amazing.
Yeah, she's the security half.
Yeah, the security half, right? Yeah, okay. But you guys travel around together and share?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's better that way, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Well, so my wife just started coding last night. So she went into like one of those meetups. That's one of her goals, the fact that we're all on lockdown. So maybe she could start traveling around with me as well.
Yeah, actually, I've started mob programming recently. It's
Oh, yeah?
here in Detroit.
That's awesome.
The world's getting really small.
That's good. So the topic for today was really inspired from the other meetup that you guys did online, as you guys had to go virtual, really around CI/CD and where people often get that wrong. I know one of your comments in there that CI/CD is not Jenkins or CD, right? So
it is not Jenkins. You know, these days tools are really easy.
Right.
The tools are getting easier all the time.
Yeah.
It's how you use the tools. And you can throw tools at people all day long and it won't make anything better. I was talking to someone today who said that their company started breaking everything up and trying to go containerized, but they still can't get a solid pipeline built.
Right.
And get people using pipelines. And if you do things out of order, it'll really burn you.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned, right, it's not Jake. So what is CD? What is CI?
So, you know, CD by itself is the ability to deploy the latest changes on demand, unless it's continuous deploy, in which case it's the latest changes as soon as they occur.
Mm-hmm.
The core of that's continuous integration. And we're teaching teams how to do continuous integration. We use a hardcore definition for that, is that everybody on the team going to master with tested code that's deployable at least once a day, preferably more often than that. When people think of continuous integration, continuous is much more frequently than people think.
Is it actually continuous or?
It's continuous, yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's hours of work, not days, sometimes minutes.
Right. Yeah.
And
I know you.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go. No, please.
The issue there is that people just don't understand how to work that way.
Yeah.
It's not about, how much code you're pushing or just writing the code. It starts way before that in really making sure that you've got true definitions of exactly what needs to be done so that it can be broken down small enough even to be able to do that. And a lot of coders, you think of like a development team, there's a bunch of people who have been coding for years, and I think traditionally some people are very just, how much code can I put out? Coding is my job. Someone else is going to plan and hand me what to code, and that's really doesn't work in the landscape of continuous integration.
Yeah, and one other thing that I heard you talk about, Dana, as well was making sure that you had the correct processes in place, right, and building those out within that. Any recommendations that you would give there as people are looking at how to put the correct processes into their pipelines?
If you're talking about getting good at it, a lot of people say, well, first we're going to get good at Agile, and then we're going to do the CD thing.
Yeah.
And you do the CD thing.
Right.
And the secret is you keep shrinking batch size.
Yeah. Okay.
For many, many reasons. As you keep shrinking the batch size, you start waste starts showing up. Pain points, constraints in the flow. Things that make it hard for you to deliver. And you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and removing those things to make it hard to deliver. Until you get to a point where the team is the thing that's the constraint, the coding is the constraint, and everything upstream and downstream is flowing well. That's what your target is.
Yeah.
It also reduces costs, increases quality. Everything gets better as you start dropping the size of the work.
Right. And you guys have mentioned this before, but there's a lot of times people will say, or I'll go to customers or people that I'm speaking with out in the field, and their customers don't want them to deploy more frequently than they are.
The secret of continuous delivery is it's not about feature delivery. Continuous delivery is about fixing production very fast,
Right.
with high level of certainty that you're not going to break it worse.
Yeah.
And you can't make that up on the fly. I mean, you don't practice fighting fires by fighting fires. You practice fighting fires by going and practicing.
Yeah.
And with continuous delivery, it has to be habit to reduce MTTR, mean time to repair, so that you can get the customer back online. And you practice that by delivering daily.
Right.
And so it's just habitual. At 3 o'clock in the morning, you're already tired. It's already a dumpster fire. Don't make it worse.
Yeah. I was actually talking with a gentleman today about a conference, all day DevOps, and he was saying that he wants to see more people talk about hey, I believe in CI/CD. I believe in doing DevOps. How do I convince finance to pay for it? Right. I'm on, my team's on. And so like he's trying to build out metrics and things like that. I mean, what you've talked about that, in your previous thing where metrics was key. You learned that the hard time, where you wish that you were doing that your first time around, right? And that you've learned that through the hard knocks just because you've been doing it for a long time. What types of metrics along the way do you think would be key to present to finance to get them to understand the value of these small batch sizes that ultimately are going to cut costs? How do you explain that to them?
If you're trying to convince finance, you start off with, hey, as we automate all these things, people are our most expensive thing, right?
Yeah.
People cost way more money than any other thing that we do. And the more that we automate and make it so people don't have to do, frankly, stupid things, repetitive work,
right?
Let people use their brains, then it reduces cost. And then if you start looking at how many defects we have and you start analyzing why we have these defects, you say, well, we have these defects because we didn't have clear requirements. Well, if we had smaller batch sizes, deliver more frequently, not only would the requirements be more clear, but any failure would be much smaller and much less expensive. Mm-hmm. And then you start talking about how, as we start improving our ability to test, instead of testing at the end, we test up front. Bugs are much easier, cheaper to fix. The closer to the source of the defect, the developer, that we detect and fix. And you say cost. And then you start talking about what we need to do is measuring every single deploy to find out how much that deploy cost and where did that cost come in and how do we reduce that cost.
Right. And what types of things can you measure? Because again, right, some people might not be familiar. Could you give a couple examples, or what do you think? How do you measure that cost? Is it more hourly rate of that employee and how long it took to deploy it, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about how much it costs, yeah, it'd be the blended rate of the resources or the people involved with getting it out.
Okay.
But also, what's the cost of delay? If we have this feature that's sitting out here that we could have been generating revenue with, how much does it cost to not have it out there, or at least a portion of it that could deliver revenue?
Right.
Yeah. And you look at it, and anytime I'm talking to someone about this, honestly, I'm looking at what do they need, and then explain to them how this solves their problem.
Yeah.
And it's true, it solves everybody's problems.
Yeah.
From a financial standpoint, in addition to all the lowering cost factors, if you're in a position where you're writing software that you're able to capitalize once the work is done, then you're able to capitalize smaller chunks as you go, rather than having a lot of cost involved for a long period of time before you get to realize that capitalization.
And also it frees up the team to innovate, which means they come up with better ideas, which then can improve upon what they already have, generate more revenue.
Yep. Yeah. And like both of you guys were saying, right? It's getting those fast feedback, right? To even say what I'm building, does it even matter to the customer, right? So
exactly. Go ahead.
And simple experiments really don't cost the teams a lot to start running. So that's kind of where you can get real-time metrics, is to take just a team and start implementing more automation. Even if it's push button automation, you don't have a full automated deploy process that just goes from your commit. You still can script things and do things to take out a lot of that time as well as just starting to get into the process. Once it's scripted and automated, to be able to build and push to test, push to production, that deployment stops being a roadblock, and you're able to start thinking about pushing code more often. Because one of the biggest issues is that if deployment takes forever, you don't want to do it very often.
Yeah.
And so you're more likely to say, well, let's just store up all these features and then we'll deploy, because we don't feel like hassling with the deploy right now.
Right.
If you put in really simple scripted things that could later be used in a bigger landscape of, pipelines built on Jenkins and better automation or an enterprise solution, you're still getting those scripts and that ability to deploy at least scripted, if not automated.
Yeah, that's
It helps take that roadblock away.
Yeah.
But something else for people that are worried about the startup cost of going towards continuous delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Continuous delivery is all about small incremental change. Even when you're trying to implement continuous delivery, you don't go from 0 to continuous delivery.
Right.
You start with a CI server, which are inexpensive to stand up. You can stand one up on a PC.
Right.
The entry cost is very low. Okay. And then you start reducing costs by starting to incrementally improve and grow the automation and improve the processes.
Right.
And so you get payback almost immediately.
And you can get Jenkins for free, right? No, I was making a joke.
Yeah, it's like a free puppy.
No, that's good. So another question that I loved in the other interview that you did was how. So talk about management. All that was great. Appreciate that feedback. What about getting the teams that are used to a monolithic application? Maybe you're a leader that's trying to drive that change because they see the value. The leader does. Mm-hmm. How do you get the teams to understand? Kind of get that culture change from a big batch to a small batch, moving forward.
The way that I've seen it done is just a challenge from leadership. Hey, how do we make this thing deploy more frequently?
Yeah.
Right? Just that challenge. Give the team a problem to solve because we're problem solvers. That's what developers do, right? And so the problem is how do we, let's say for instance you've got something that's deploying every quarter, and that it takes you a year to go from idea to production, and that's just not going to work. It's not sustainable. Right. Not in today's environment.
Yep.
And so you give the team the challenge, hey, I want to deploy this every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's go solve the problem. And then point to them some resources and then work with them. Don't ever answer any questions, right? Hey, here's some ideas. How do we get this done? And if they jump straight to what we need is Kubernetes and everything broken up to microservices, you say, well, hang on. First, let's see if we can get this giant monolith deployed more frequently.
Right.
Let's stabilize first. And then
sounds like what I heard you say there, Bryan, is really kind of focus in on help guide them, but you're going to them, trying to get them to be the ones that are thinking of the creative ways, but guide them to make sure it's just not completely off track.
Well, and find the community of people that are kind of excited about it because it's really cool to do this.
Yeah.
It was even cool back before it was cool. I mean, we were working on this in 2015 the first time.
Right.
And it was kind of cool, but it wasn't like a big industry thing yet.
Right.
But now it's cool. Yeah. And there's people out there that'll think this is, developers tend to fall in love with technology. Yeah. Well, this is a business problem that's also technology. And get people excited about it, and they'll drive it. Yeah. And Dana and I actually, it was a talk before the talk we gave last year. A teammate of mine talked about that if you lead a team down this path of solving this problem and they get cold feet, they'll keep solving the problem. Maybe not for you, because it's just a better way of working.
But I think the other thing comes in is just the understanding. You have to get kind of the business or the leadership or the product owners on board with asking for detail, giving a detailed enough problem for which they're looking for a specific solution. Because developers also want to gold plate, they want to keep working on things, they want to make it as pretty as possible. So if you're asking for 10 features at a time, then the team's going to try and provide that. But if you rein in what's coming into the team and what their understanding of the next, I mean, it's good to have the vision, and that's important for the team to understand. But if the work comes in understandably smaller between both the product owner and the business, or business, product owner, and the team, then it starts becoming a smaller thing to focus on, which makes us easier to break down into smaller deliverables.
I think comes to the Phoenix Project WIP, right? Work in
Yeah.
whatever.
Either one.
Yeah.
But, and to Dana's point, though, she touches on something that's super critical.
Yeah.
The automation's easy. That's what happens after coding. The coding is actually fun. Okay. What happens before that is the work. And the work requires everybody. All the stakeholders have to be involved. It is not a development team problem. It is an organization problem. The organization has to change itself to support this flow. And if the organization is not willing to change, then they will never succeed in executing this flow.
Yeah, great points. Yeah. So one thing, so we're coming up on time on how long I try to keep these interviews. I could talk with you guys for absolutely forever because I think this is great. Bryan, you mentioned that where you guys are now taking a CI/CD team remote, right? And that's a new change, and you guys are finding a lot of success.
Well, I mean, we're finding a lot of experiments.
Thanks for taking the words out of my mouth there, right? But anyways, that could be a great thing to circle back with you guys on, because I know everybody's trying to figure out how to, at least those that weren't previously remote, companies, organizations previously are trying to figure out how to continue to do
most of us.
Yeah. So maybe we could circle back on that. But thanks, guys, so much for being willing to jump on here. I think this will be informative. And I hope you guys have a good evening and are able to wrap up that basement here soon, all right?